All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and especially Jenn McKinlay. Is that right, McKinley?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't want to butcher it. Author of our February book, Love at First Book. And I've like entered this into like Google search a million times this month, and I keep reading Love at First Sight. I'm like, no, it's not Love at First Sight. Like a mind
No.
block I have. Anyways, we really appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate everybody joining us tonight in wherever you are. Actually, that's always interesting. If you want to pop into the chat window where you're calling from to give Jen an idea of where everybody is based. We'll also record this so that we can put it in various spots on our website and on our social media for people to watch after the fact. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Toronto, Boston, Ottawa, just Ontario. Jody's in Ontario somewhere. Henderson. Henderson is in Nevada. Aurora, Saskatoon. All right. And Jen, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Arizona.
Arizona. I love Arizona. It's like my favorite place in the States, actually. If you haven't been to Arizona, you should go to Arizona, especially
Yeah.
Sedona. It's beautiful.
So pretty. Yeah.
Windsor. All right. Jen, I'm going to just read a very short bio. Yes, I agree, Jill. I'm going to read a very short bio of you, and then we will. I have 100 questions for you, of course. But anybody with us today, you're absolutely welcome to pop the question into the chat window, or if you want to ask live, we really encourage that because that's always fun. So there is a raise your hand functionality that we can use. Or you can just chime in if you like, because it's not a huge group, so I think we can manage that. So, Jen, I'm just reading your bio from your website. Jen is a New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly best-selling author of several mystery and romance series. She's also the winner of the RT Reviewers' Choice Award for Romantic Comedy and the Fresh Fiction Award for Best Cozy Mystery. A TEDx speaker, she's always happy to talk about books, writing, reading, and the creative process to anyone who cares to listen. Well, we care. She lives in sunny Arizona in a house that is overrun with books, pets, and her husband's guitars. All right. So I will kick off with a question that we have so everybody's already read the book, so there's no spoilers. We don't need to worry about that. We read it in February, so we've come full circle here. And I have so much about the book, but I don't know if I want to dive right in. Maybe, Jen, you want to give us a little bit of background into how it all came to be. How did you get into writing and how it all started?
Sure. I was a reader. My mom was a librarian, so Saturdays were, go to the library, get your stack of books. My husband and I actually met in a library. I was, a writer who worked part-time. He was a musician who worked part-time. So it's like there were 20 somethings, that was our regular job. But so yeah, reading was just always like my safe space. And then I think I was like 16 and I saw the movie Romancing the Stone. Did
Okay.
everybody see that? Has everybody seen that? Well, it was like the first time I saw an author, portrayed. And of course, it's Kathleen Turner at her prime, and she lives in New York. And it was like, yeah, why wouldn't I want to do that? So, so that kind of kicked it in gear. But then, life, it's not like the movies. So, yeah, then it was a lot of slugging it out and working at the library. And then I think finally I was married, I had my kids, and I got the call, the one where they were going to buy your book. And it had been because this was 2000. So it was still like you sent it in on paper with a disc, it was so old school. And this woman called and she was like, "Hi, I'm calling from Harlequin. We want to buy your book." And I was just like, I'm holding my newborn. I'm like, "What book? Like, what are you even talking about?" Because it had been a year, I'd completely forgotten. So that was my first. I wrote a few rom-coms for Harlequin and then pivoted to mysteries and then pivoted back to rom-coms. And now I'm going into fantasy and, yeah. So it's been a long and winding road.
I think that's a great segue into genre, actually. And do you have a preferred genre or sort of like what is directed this change from one to the other? And yeah, fantasy. So that's what we have to expect. That's my last question after after the interview. Where are we going next? But yeah,
Yeah, who knows?
how does genre sit
Um,
with you?
I think for me, it's like the one thing that's always I always write comedy because well, I'm just kind of like if I'm not laughing, I'm not interested,
Mm.
because life is just so hard. That's and I'm a Gen X kid, so latchkey, sitcoms. We were raised on, Bewitched, the Flintstones, the Monkeys, all the
Yeah.
reruns. So it's like I can't have a problem that's more than 22 and a half minutes. So it like has to be comedy. And then for me, it's like I started in the rom-coms, but then my agent at the time kind of pushed me into mysteries. And she was just like, why don't you try those on? You can see my whole wall up there.
Oh wow. Oh wow, I love it.
Well, it keeps me motivated when I'm
That's
like,
a
you
great
suck.
Zoom wall.
Yeah, and it's just like really like their foam board, they're like $10. So I was like, I need inspiration. Like you can do this. So yeah, and there's a lot of the mysteries there. So I kind of went into mysteries and then uh publishing always goes through these shifts. So I was in mysteries, mysteries were doing great, then mysteries weren't doing great. So then it was like, okay, my editor was like, go back to rom-coms. I'm like, all right, but maintain your mysteries. Okay. So then it was like, right, rom-coms as well. And then that was cool. And then um mass market is kind of disappearing. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. So, like, this guy over here was a mass market, and then they were like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So then they were like, can you write, this kind of thing? Here it is. See, this is kind of nice.
Okay.
Like, could you go into trade paper? And it was like, sure, that seems like I'm gonna have to cause my characters more pain than I like, but all right. And so then we started doing that, and then see, everything's just it comes things come at you. You have to pay attention, and then they just come. They just arrive. Like I really genuinely trust the universe because stuff I've never thought of shows up. So I'm writing the rom-coms. It's great. My agent said, "Hey, how about you write novellas? For audio, because audio is super hot, and Audible wants like short, and they want Valentine's Day, a summer, and the holidays." And I was like, all right, I can do that. So I wrote up some ideas and then we sent them to Audible and we waited. And then they said something like, well, we looked at her audio numbers. We love the ideas, but her audio numbers are not great. So pass. And I was just like, this is where I work on spite. So I wrote them anyway. And then they went to auction and they got picked up by another audio publisher, and that was super awesome. And that was this collection of novellas. So then the crazy thing with those novellas was it's set in a museum of literature.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's fun. What can I do with that? I set it in New York City. It was like my dream of what a cool library would be. And so it's this museum of literature. And I put in this one just random department in the museum called the Books of Dubious Origin. And then I developed these few characters that are hardly on the page in the novellas, but I really, really liked them. And then I just kind of was like, I think I want to write a fantasy. And my agent was like, do it. So now Witches, they changed. It was going to be called Books of Dubious Origin, but they changed it to Witches of Dubious Origin. So that'll come out in October, and that's my first fantasy. So it's like sometimes it's planned and sometimes it just happens, and I just kind of follow. You know what I mean? Follow the idea.
Yeah, I love that. You seem so versatile. I don't think I've met an author that's as versatile.
It's funny because I was talking to an author and she was saying like she very much stays in her lane, and like she likes her lane, but she also said like she said, "Do I love what I'm writing all the time?" And she said, "No." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of a bummer," because I genuinely do because I'm always doing different stuff. Like I think if I could only write one book, I would probably get bored. But
Yeah,
so I'm
that's
lucky.
amazing. And it's amazing that like you're able to do it, right? Because I think that's why a lot of them stay in their lane because there's questions about.
It's true. Well, and that goes back to being just a reader. Like I had a fantasy era, I had a mystery era, I had rom-com era, I even had like the erotica era. I mean, there's like not any genre I haven't. I even got really into like The Martian and Project Hail Mary. That's why I even like science fiction. I mean, I love it all. So
Well, that's great. Well, I hope the fantasy does really well because I feel like the fantasy readers are a huge loyal bunch, and you'll have to write like 8 prequels.
Yeah, it's a commitment, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so back to Love at First Book. I wanted to say Love at First Sight. Emily.
Yes.
Okay, full disclosure here, romance is not my first choice. We change genres every month, so I end up reading romance whether I want to or not. But the caveat here is that I love this book because I loved that Emily had this like sort of like chronic, what would we call it? Just like health insecurity. And I love to
Yeah,
hear about that because I have
right. I
never
know.
read anything like that in any book.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Hmm.
That was so when I graduated college, I got a job, my first library job. The people were very nice. The town was very nice. And I was so bored. I was so bored. Oh my God, I became a total hypochondriac.
You were so bored.
Like I would sit there and be like, is that a tumor? And then I'd go into the medical books and I'd be like, yeah, you're gonna die. You're gonna die in this boring job. So when I was writing Emily, I was kind of like, I got you.
Goodness.
Because then I found a more interesting job and then I was over it. But you know what I mean? But I think like people go through that. I think like sometimes, like to me, Emily is just someone who's too much in her own head.
Mhm.
And then when she finally steps into her life, she stops doing that.
Yeah. All right. And I'm the name because uh, goodness. Siobhan. How do I say that?
Siobhan.
Siobhan. Oh my goodness, so easy.
Yeah,
Okay.
real intuitive. Yeah.
I know. Siobhan's novels mean so much to Emily, books that helped her through tough times. Have you ever had a book or author who was that kind of lifeline for you?
Yeah, and weirdly, it was recently. So 2020, we all remember, the pandemic and the lockdown and how sad life was. I also suffered at the same time a real significant personal loss. And I'll start crying if I talk about it, so I won't. But suffice to say, it was devastating. And I couldn't read and I couldn't really write and I couldn't seem to find my way out of the grief spiral. And then a friend of mine, a Canadian, who's a
Yay.
writer, yeah, writer up in Toronto, sent me a note and she's like, have you ever read the Chronicles of St. Mary? And I was like, no. And she said, oh my God. She's like, I just picked up one and devoured them. And I said, okay, cool. Who is it? And she said, it's Jodi Taylor. And I was like, cool. So I picked up the first one and it was the first time I was able to read. And same thing, like those books got me through because there's a lot. She's very prolific. There's a lot of books and it's kind of she's got humor and adventure, but the whole premise is they're a group of historians, but they can travel through time.
Hmm.
So she literally takes you through time to like Queen Mary and the Scots and all of that, but also you're also back with the dinosaurs. Like they can literally go anywhere in time. It's like kind of got a little bit of, Doctor Who, but it was anyway. So yes, to answer your question, I find I'm a series reader. I love
Yep.
finding an author's voice who I love, and I will start at book one and I will go all the way through and I will be utterly committed until I finish. But Jodi Taylor, The Chronicles of St. Mary, I highly recommend. They were just adventure, romance, you know,
Did
laughter.
you
I loved
ever
it.
get to meet
Loved it.
her by any chance?
I don't because she's English and I haven't like been able to stalk her on her own ground, but someday I will.
Is that the idea? Where did that come from? The initial idea for the book.
For this book, for Love
Yeah.
at First Book.
First, yeah, Love at First Book.
Um, I had the character Emily because she shows up in Summer Reading, which I wrote before it, and
Yes,
that
that's
one,
right.
yeah, that was hard because it was a dyslexic character, and I don't have, being a reader, like I really had to get it right. So it was really interesting, and I learned a lot. And Emily was just kind of this cool, like she wasn't even supposed to have her own book, but I just liked her so much, I just
Mhm.
wanted her to have that life that I knew she could. So, um, it kind of just evolved. Like she's so much me, like you were talking about authors that have really, or series that meant so much to you. Like as a kid, it was Anne of Green Gables and, just stuff like that. And I wanted her to have that. And of course, the Harry Potter generation, I mean, I think I was 30 when Harry Potter came out. So I was definitely older, but man, those books really resonated. I loved them, and my kids loved them, and I just loved how they meant so much. And I kept thinking, like, what if she never wrote the last book? Can you imagine if she never wrote the last book? Or any series that you love, if they never
Yeah, he
finished it,
has a
you'd just
good
be like,
notion.
it's kind of like all the people waiting for the Game of Thrones. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
is he
yeah.
ever going to write that last book? Is there one book or five? I don't know. But so having her be a librarian and have an author, and then having the opportunity to work with that author, and then I had to put a stick in this book, so it had to be the son. You know what I mean? Who doesn't want her there? So it's just kind of, it was pretty organic, like I
Yeah.
have to say.
All right. For everybody who has joined, oh, Rita. Rita has a question.
I was going to ask a question. Hi, Jen. Um,
Hi.
so the book is full of literary quotes,
Yes.
which I loved. So I wanted to find out, like, did you know those off the top of your head? Did you research them? How did you choose which ones? And were there any that were your favorites that you couldn't fit in?
Wow. Good. Whoa. Really good question. Some of them I knew, like the Anna Karenina one. I love that one. And I've always loved that one because yeah, it's beautiful. Some of the others I would look up, like I would kind of be looking at where they were in their conversation, or if I wanted something funny, or I wanted something, a lot of them I did know. Some of them, like I said, I did look up. I think I managed to shoehorn in everyone I wanted. Um, but I felt like it really added to their personalities, their relationship. And
The
as
sparring.
people who love books and love reading, it's like we all have, I mean, I'm sure everybody has quotes that they just cling to, that they keep.
Thanks, Rita. Let's talk about, okay, sorry, I was saying, if you do have a question, you can raise your hand or you can ask it in the chat window and I'll be sure to ask Jen. But let's talk about Ireland as a setting now. Did you, I mean, it was such a magical setting and the descriptions made it feel so vivid in that little town. Like I loved everything about it. Did you travel there or have you been there or how did you bring it to life?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really lucky. When I pitched it, my editor wanted me to change it to England, but I'm Irish. So I was like, yeah, and I've done stuff in England before. So I was like, no, we're going to Ireland. Um, Actually, the village that's mentioned in this book is also used in a book I wrote a couple of years ago called Paris is Always a Good Idea. So the heroine goes to that. So when I knew I wanted to go to Ireland, I'm like, oh, we're going back to Finn's Hollow because I loved it. But the Ireland is magical to me. I have been several times. I have cousins who live in Portlosh. They're Midlanders, and then I have two cousins. One recently passed away, which I'm really sad about. But they're nuns, and they live in the nun retirement home in Dublin, and they're just adorable, and I love them. So when I go over to visit, now I just have Joan. We've lost Catherine, but my cousins, Shun and Anna, live in Portlosh. So when I was writing it, I could like hit them a text or like, "Do you guys say this?" And they would be like, "No." No. But I did go over it. I hung out with the family, and then I had my mom, my college roommate, and her daughter, who was my flower girl at my wedding. So it was four women in a car. I was the driver, and I drove us around the Ring of Kerry because that's pretty much where it's set. My mom is the historian because she's been over there even more than anybody and knows everything. And then my college roommate is a nurse, so she was the medic, which we did actually need. The flower girl who's now in her 30s, was our navigator.
Amazing.
Because she would sit in the back and like tell me, she would talk me through, because I'm driving and I'm on, like, it is weird. It is very weird and kind of scary. But she would sit in the back and it was so funny. She'd be like, okay, Jen, you're coming up on a roundabout. You're gonna you're gonna stop or pause, then go to your left. And she would like talk me through it. And then she'd be like, we're gonna go all the way around. You're gonna enter at 6 and you're gonna exit at 3. And I'd be like, driving the clock. And we'd be halfway through and she'd be like, oh, little blue in front of you is getting out on 3. Follow little blue. So I would follow that car. And then we'd get through it. And she'd be like, good job, good job. I mean, I got home after like 10 days in Ireland with her coaching. And I was like, I want her in my car all the
Yeah,
time.
you can't drive without her now.
It was lovely. And I also think it was super successful because it was 4 women.
Yeah.
Like there was no we're making good time or any of that. We would literally be like, oh, let's go look at that, or there's a castle. You know what I mean? It was goofy stuff. Um, but it was magical. It was fantastic. Everybody's so nice. Everybody's hilarious. A lot of the little dialogue and stuff is taken right out of our trip. Like there's a scene where Kier is teaching Emily how to drive. And that other guy comes up and he's like, keep the bitch in the ditch, like you always want to keep your passenger safe, so keep the bitch in the ditch. That's actually how a cabbie was teaching me how to drive. I told him I'm going to drive, and he's like, oh, wow. You want to keep your passengers safe, keep them on the curb. Or as we say, keep the bitch in the ditch. And I was like, that's totally going in the book. So yeah, I love Ireland. I could absolutely go anytime.
Amazing. All right. So Kieran is a quintessential broody love interest. What makes a grumpy character so fun to write? And did you always plan for him to have that personality? And I think you said earlier that you had to have sort of like a spoken stick in the spoke, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, he came along exactly like that. I knew he was going to be grumpy. I knew he was going to have, issues. And I kind of like the grumpy sunshine, you know, because I think it proves out. Like I watch my women friends with their male partners, and it never ceases to amaze me that the man is usually the grumpy one, and the woman is usually, and it seems like the grumpier he is, the more
Funny.
light she is. It's like they just kind of, it's like magnets. They just find each other, You need that balance. So yeah, I knew he was going to be that, but I started thinking about like an Irish hero, and it's like, he has to have dark hair and he has to kind of be that, guy standing on the cliffs looking out at the sea. Like he really just popped in like, oh yeah.
Well, he was a fun character to read. I liked him a lot.
I did too. It was fun. I liked that he was kind of like a Luddite too. Like he wasn't up on technology,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were like trying to badger him into coming into I thought that was kind of fun.
So, writer's block is a major part of the story. Have you ever experienced it? And if so, I mean, you told us already about one significant episode, but is it something that you struggle with often or?
No, it's I think it's for me it's less writer's block than it is trying to convince people they should buy. Back in the day, it's like it seemed like it was more convincing people that my stuff was, worth publishing. And then it's like I would get the no thank you, and then it would be like, all right, well, what's next? And I would pivot to another idea. And some ideas just flesh out better than others. But I have not had writer's block, but I worry about it. It's like one of those things where you're like, if you don't have anxiety, but you might have anxiety, like you can give yourself anxiety. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like, there's a lot going on up here all the time.
And I mean, that's what I appreciate mostly about the book too, is that like it wasn't very like it was light, but there was like some really deep themes in there that we read through. So I appreciated that because anytime I start a rom-com, I'm like, I already know it's going to be just like this, and it was. So it was
Oh,
nice.
good for the win.
Success. The novel plays with the idea of mentorship, admiration, and what happens when you meet your heroes. Have you ever had an experience of meeting someone you deeply admired? And did it live up to your expectations? We already know you haven't met Jodie Taylor, but have you met somebody else?
I did. I actually, when I started writing mysteries, one of the people I read as a kid was Elizabeth Peters. Um, and she's a mystery writer and she did historical mysteries. So, gosh, back in like 2012, I don't go to a lot of conferences because I'm in Arizona and a lot of them aren't anywhere near me, but also it's time and, blah, blah, blah. So, there was a conference in 2012 called Malice Domestic, and it's always in Bethesda, Maryland. And I saw that Elizabeth Peters, her real name is Barbara Michaels, was going to be there. And like, I was like, oh my God, I have to go. So I went, I flew, I left my kids, the husband, good luck, people. And I flew across country, and it was, tricky to navigate Washington and getting where I needed to be. But I got there, and then she had a guest of honor banquet kind of thing. And I just happened to be sitting at the table when she was leaving because at this point she was very elderly. I mean, she had someone assisting her with her walking. And as she was going by my table, of course, I pop up out of my chair and scare the hell out of her. She's like, oh, and then I started to cry.
Oh,
Big dope. I just was like, and all I could get out was like, thank you, because for a writer, those are the people who are the reason we become writers. So she really meant everything to me. And I just was like, thank you. And then she started to cry. And then she was like, no, thank you. And we're just like both, it was ridiculous. But, it was that moment for me. It was like awesome. So
that's
yeah.
probably what every author hopes to like achieve. Did she know you were an author?
I think so, because it's pretty much a conference just for authors. Like nobody else really goes. So it was, yeah, she probably knew. But yeah, I
Oh.
couldn't even talk. I thought I'd be like, oh, thank you so much. You're amazing. And I was like, thank you. It's ridiculous.
Oh well, that happens. She got to meet her.
Yeah,
Has
exactly.
she has she passed now?
She has passed. So meet your heroes when you can, and hopefully they don't disappoint you. She did not disappoint.
Okay, well, we can move on to if anybody has a question again, just to remind you, you can ask it live or you're welcome to put it in the chat. Oh, there you go, chat window. Rita wants to know, do you think Emily ends up writing her own book or stays as an editor and working at the bookshop?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. From the editors I know, a few of them will cross over and become writers, but very few. Like
Mm.
most editors are really committed to making a book the best it can be. And I think part of that when they were writing the book together, Kira and Emily, like they were both talking about how absolutely miserable it's like I mean, deadlines are horrible. Like if you're not on top of it, it's just the worst. It's like you don't shower for 5 days and you don't see daylight. I mean, it's bad. So yeah, I think I like to think that she would just be an amazing editor,
I
but you never
like
know.
I liked though that they like felt believable at the end when they wrote together because I was
Yeah.
like it felt like that was like such a huge task for her, especially once we understood her diagnoses. So I liked that that felt like actually like it worked.
Yeah, it was that book really came together nicely. I'm very happy with it.
Okay, so now we'll move on to writing process. You're known for writing stories that celebrate books, bookstores, and libraries, which we really love. What is it about a bookish setting that keeps you coming back?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, my whole life has been books. Mom's a librarian. I was a librarian. My husband's a librarian. So, I think that's just like my safe space. Any place with books. It's like when my boys were at home. They're grown now, but I would be on deadline and I'd have to go work. And I had two places. I had my own specific study carrel at the public library. And that's where I worked and everybody knew it. And then at
I
the
love
coffee shop,
that.
I had my,
That's cool.
it was like I'm just walking, hi, yeah,
Like a
can I talk to you?
parking spot.
It was. And then if someone was in it, I was very unhappy.
He must have
But
been
anyway,
from out of town.
it was like I have to go, but like I liked the way the plug worked. I liked the light. Like I liked the chair. Like I liked the traffic flow around it. Anyway, I was a little attached. But and then I would also go to the coffee shop. Like sometimes I had my own spot at the coffee shop. So it was one or the other, depending on, what time of day I was sneaking out to write and which one was open. So, but I think those are just, I don't know, comfortable places for me. Like whenever I travel, I go and look at the local library. So like when I was in Notting Hill, I was in that library, and then we were in Mexico and I went into those libraries, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just, you feel safe in a library.
Yeah, it's true. I like that. Um, do you have a favorite part of the writing process? The initial idea, the drafting, the revising, or is it all equally or terrible? Equally wonderful or terrible?
It can be both. That's a really good question. I've never really thought about it. I have friends who absolutely despise the first draft. I like it, but it's to me the first draft is the hardest because I'm trying to get as much of it right as possible so that the rewrites aren't horrible, but it never goes that way. I love the idea. The idea part is great. You're like, oh, I have an amazing idea because you don't know yet whether it's going to fail. So that's kind of exciting. But I actually I just like writing. So I like revising because I feel like I'm making it better. I used to hate copy edits because I was just like, oh, who cares? But now I even like copy edits. And then I like when you're so far away from the book that you forgot that you wrote it. And then you read it and you're like, that is not bad. That's probably the best part.
So when you write the first draft, I hear you saying like I've talked to lots of authors who say the first draft is garbage. Nobody will ever see the light of day because it's just like I gotta get it down. But it sounds like that's not your process.
Yeah, I outline so that kind of I feel like that gives me a little bit of a running start. And then my first draft, yeah, it can be a hot mess, but I tend to start the day by going back. So I'll get a running start. So I always go back to the chapter I wrote the day before, reread it, edit it, and then write the next chapter. So then
Mhm.
the next day it'll be. So I'm always it's kind of like sewing when you backstitch. You know what I mean? I'm always kind of backstitching my work. So hopefully I'm catching a lot of the things that are on fire so that maybe there's little flames, but not, So yeah. But again, everybody's process is so different.
And when you say you outline, that means from the beginning you have the entire story sort of like planned and everything that like the major scenes are all in your mind and
So much the scenes and like what I my outline. Okay, so this I'll give you the history on how I moved to mysteries because I wrote those romantic comedies for Harlequin, and then my husband was like, I was having a hard time. Maybe it's because I was like I was covered. It was that part of my life where I was covered in spit up or changing a diaper. You know what I mean? It was
in
just
there.
not a lot of yeah. It was not a lot of rom-com there. So I was much more into murder at the moment. you know. So my husband was the one he said, why don't you try writing mysteries? Because he knows I love all genre. He's like, why don't you give mysteries a go? Just like, write it backward. Because I thought they were super hard. I'm like, God, you have to know the killer and red herrings, blah, 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 and that's super hard and I don't want to. He's like, write it backwards, you'll be fine. And I also have to say he's a musician and a librarian, but he was also the music editor for our newspaper for many years. So man of many hats. So he knows how to write.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. All right, I'll give that a try. So then I started writing mysteries, but I wasn't selling. Like mysteries are tough to break into. Mystery readers are very specific. Mystery publishers are very specific. A thriller actually really has to be thrilling. um, so I was writing mysteries and I had an agent and we were getting close, but we weren't quite getting there. And then the publisher, the one I'm with now, came back to my agent and said, we have an idea for a mystery. Would Jenn be interested in writing it?
Hmm.
And of course, I was like, is the door going to open that much? Because I can work with that. So I said, yeah, of course I will. And so what they gave me was what they called the Bible. And it was the editor who had conceptualized this book. Because before that, I had never outlined. I had always seated the pants it. You know what I mean? Like blank page every day, like, oh my God, what are we doing? So when I started with the mysteries and they handed me this Bible, I was like, sweet. It's like the secret handshake, we're always looking for. So it was 10 pages. It was a high concept, one paragraph, just, this is what's happening. Then it was the setting, a time of year, that kind of thing. And then it was the main characters. And then it was, I want to say about 10 pages of an outline. So not every scene, but, you know, enough meat there on the bones that you could be like, all right, so I got it and I read it and I was like, cool. Can I make the people younger? Can I make them single? Can I basically redo it? And they were like, sure, whatever. So then I wrote that, and that was what they call a writer for hire. So the publisher owned the copyright, and I got to write the book, and I got paid just like I would, except I can never like take them and republish them
Oh, wow.
because they will always own them.
Oh,
Whereas
that's
with my other stuff,
fascinating.
yeah, if my other stuff goes out of print, I can just, put a new cover, upgrade it, and put it back out there. So, but it got me in the door. So
Yeah.
then, of course, that's where the mysteries kind of spiraled for me. I went into panic mode and then pitched them like 5 more ideas, and they were like, "Yeah, whatever, okay." So yeah, I have 2 series that I wrote as a writer for hire, and then all of the other ones are mine.
I have never heard about that, the writer for hire. Do a lot of publishers do that? Like they just have like this department that comes up with ideas?
It's usually an editor, like an editor's trying to acquire what she thinks or he thinks will sell. So then they're like, oh, I have an idea.
Right.
And, I was lucky that whoever wrote this one up, it was very well formed. And they gave me that because then I took that and wrote up all the ideas I had, and suddenly they were selling. And it was like,
Right.
oh, because I gave them enough to
Right.
really
You gave them
evaluate the
the format
project.
that they kind of like knew about or
The
adhered
in-house,
to.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
I know,
That's
pretty
awesome.
crazy. And I have it. If anybody wants it, I can send it to you. I still have the Bible.
Okay, Shayna wants to know, my favorite things to know are if there were scenes that were cut out of the book or changed in a surprising way. Was this always the title? And did you, oh, she's got all sorts of questions. Did you know you wanted to write this one when you finished summer reading? Do you think you will write more in this series?
I don't know if there'll be any more in the series. I'm working on the next, I'm writing it right now, the next rom-com for Penguin, and it's called The Summer Share, and it's set in the Outer Banks. So, and it's totally a new cast. So I don't know if there'll be any more, but I never say never because, clearly you never know. Now I forgot some of the questions.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, were there scenes that were cut? Was
Yeah, were
that
there
one?
scenes that were cut or changed in a surprising way?
The last scene where it is the long room at Trinity, which I love, and it was like really cool. I didn't think of that at first. I had written that he came to Martha's Vineyard to win her back. And I loved that scene, but my editor was like, it's not really, and it was the same kind of setup where I had Sam and Ben from summer reading and they were with her and, they were on Martha's Vineyard where they had the big, the grand gesture. And then my editor was just like, can you put him on a beach in Italy or something? And I was like, but that makes no sense. Why would they go to Italy? Why would they be on a beach in Italy? And then I was just like, where could they go that would be a grand gesture? And then I thought of the long room and I was like, that's it. That's where they need to resolve all this. So
Much
that was one.
closer.
So that's kind of how that goes. My editor, I love my editor. She's very, very tough. The reason my books are so good is because she is a total pain in my butt. But
Why?
yeah, but she also lets me, like I said, when I was like, nah, the beach isn't working for me. I want to do the long run. And she was like, oh yeah, you're right. What was I thinking? So we're very good together, and I really value her. And actually the fantasy I just wrote, she's never edited fantasy before. So it was really awesome of her to let me do it and encourage it. And we both worked so hard on it because I hadn't written one, she hadn't edited one. So it was like a lot of like second guessing, rethinking, rewrite that one. Oh my God, every single scene was rewritten in that
Oh
book.
my goodness.
So yeah. And what was the other question?
The next question was, oh, the title. Was this always the title?
No, the title was supposed to be To Be Read.
Oh, that's good too.
And then they were like, no, people aren't going to understand that. And I'm like, book people will
Book
understand
people
it.
will absolutely understand that.
And they're book people in the book. So to me, it made perfect sense. But they were like, no, they're going to say to be read. That doesn't make sense. I'm like, nobody's going to see that. So I
That's
know,
so
right? Thank you. Thank
yeah.
you. But so I love it. First book was okay. It was all right. But I liked to be read better.
Rita says a follow-up question to Shayna's is if you were to write a spin-off set in Finn's Hollow, book 3 in the series, which side character would you love to explore in more depth?
Oh, wow. Hmm. Did I leave a young single person there? I can't
I don't
remember. You know
know.
who I would do? I loved the girl, Neve, who
Oh
worked in the
yeah,
bookshop.
yeah, yeah, she's
I
awesome.
would do Neve, but older. Like I would go back like 10 years later and write Neve's story because she was a kick in the pants. I liked her a lot.
She was a great choice. I always wondered what was going on with her, just lurking in the background.
Those teens, those miserable teens.
All right. So I think we've already talked about this question I have about genres. Oh, okay. This is a great question. Your book has such a loyal following. What's the most memorable interaction you've had with a reader? Sorry, your books, plural. So any of them is fair game.
Oh, that's when being an author is kind of like a magical thing. I get a lot of emails, that people are just really, really nice. I don't get a lot of nasty ones, which I'm really grateful for. But I got a lot of really nice ones. And I had two things, one in person and one email. So the in person was one of my mystery fans was in town, and she was just like, I just really want to meet you, but I didn't have any signings or anything. But I'd seen her online. Like I felt like I knew her, because I'm trying to be a little bit more careful because I've had a
It's
couple of
like,
stalking
no, you
things,
cannot just go to Arizona and
Yeah.
try and meet Jen.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I had some weird stalkery things happen. So I'm a little bit more careful now. But this one I'd seen her for years, and she's Peach, and I was just like, I'm like, well, why don't we meet up? So she and I met up at a bakery, a cupcake bakery, and she was so cute. When I walked in, and she was like literally shaking, like
Oh,
like shaking, and then she started crying.
oh, I
So I
love
had my Elizabeth Peters moment, and I was just like, oh, it's okay. It's all right. It's fine. Let's just eat cupcakes. We're good. So she was delightful and lovely, and I really appreciate her. She's still, I see her all the time online, and she's always excited about the books. So, and she reads all the genres, which I really appreciate. But so that was one that was live. And like I said, I'm not super like, yeah, come to town, let's do dinner. But like if I've known you for a couple of years, it's like, okay, all right, I'll make time for you. Um, and then one was a woman who just wrote me an email that just her son was having a surgery at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and it was a pretty significant surgery, and she was going to be there for days.
yeah.
So she just wrote me a note saying, I just randomly picked up your book, and it got me through that
Oh,
hellish experience. And I had done a 9-day tour of duty at Phoenix Children's with one of my kids. So it was like
oh,
that one hit me like a punch in the chest. It was like, oh, honey, I have sat in your seat,
yeah.
So that one meant a lot. And it's just like as a writer, you write your little book and you hope people like it, but you don't know. And then you'll get a little note like that and you're like, okay, all those late nights, tears, fury, frustration, self-doubt, it's worth it, totally.
Amazing. And to go back to sort of like you don't know whether people like the book or not, do you read your reviews?
No, no, no. And when I see other writers who are like, oh, I read this, I got this, and I'm like, why would you do that? Um, I will read like a magazine review
Mhm.
if it's vetted by, like if it's Book List or Library Journal or Kirkus or Publishers Weekly or somebody like that. And if it comes from my agent where she's like, you got a really good one, you could, I'm like, okay. But I think I fully expect not everybody's going to love my work. Why would
Mhm.
they? That makes no sense. I would, I don't expect people to go out of their way to trash people, but I know that they do that. So I
Yeah.
think for me, it's kind of a protect your peace thing because it's hard enough to write a book, but if I let that criticism into my head, then it's that much harder.
Yeah.
So, and this is going to sound terrible, but I don't really believe 5-star reviews either because I know my books will resonate with certain people and for them it'll be a 5, but I
Yeah.
also know other people will be incredibly bored.
Yeah.
I think of those people with no sense of humor, but whatever. And that's okay. I mean, I don't, how many of us have seen a book that like blew up and everybody loved it and we're just like, I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
So it's okay, but I feel like as an artist you have to be really careful about what you let into
Yeah.
your psyche.
I feel like because I've obviously talked to a lot of authors and it seems like the ones that have been doing it for a long time really have figured that out. And maybe the newer ones are like, oh yeah, I devour every comment on my book. And I'm like, I don't think there's space for that in you.
No, I think, then at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to wake up and just be like, and I don't need that.
Yeah.
It's like nobody needs that. But you
Um,
also have to, I think this is the thing that I think too. I think there's a lot of authors. I'm trying to figure out how to say this nicely because I don't want to be mean, but I think there's a lot of authors who expect everybody to love their
yeah,
work. And
yeah,
that's just not really showing a real understanding of your fellow man.
yeah,
Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
So you have to be ready. Like you have to kind of anticipate that not everybody's going to love you. And then you don't have to read it. You don't
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah. Okay, two more questions to finish this off. Kate wants to know if you have a daily writing routine.
I try really hard. Weirdly, I used to get up at like 5 in the morning, write for a couple hours before I had to get the kids to school. And then I worked part-time when they were little. And then I would come home, they'd do homework, I would write, they'd go to bed, activities, bed, and then I would write at night. And it was like, I look back now and I'm like, those were some long days,
Mhm.
as everybody who has young ones knows. And then I was lucky enough to be able to leave the part-time job, and you would think I would just have this structured, I'm gonna write, but suddenly it was like, oh, I want to have a garden. I'm gonna start working out at the gym. Oh, my son and I are training for a 5K. So now it's like what used to be like get my stuff done between 8 and noon, when I had to, is now I start working at about 2 in the afternoon and I don't stop till about 10 o'clock at night. I'm like this weird mid shifter where I like to play in the morning. I want to go out. I want to have my coffee in the garden. I want to walk my dogs. I want to, paint a room, whatever strikes my whatever crazy head. Go work on a craft. I took up weaving recently. Why? I don't know. Um, you know. So yeah, I don't really have one. I wish I was better. I think my life would be easier if I was that much more disciplined, but I just seem to be in this weird menopausal.
Rita wants to know if Love at First Sight were adapted into a movie, who would your dream cast for Emily and Kieran be?
Oh wow, that's really hard because I kind of see Emma Stone
Yeah.
for Emily, redheaded Emma Stone, and then for Kieran, I had a guy in mind when I was writing it. Now I can't remember his name. It's tricky because he's Irish. There was that it's kind of like, and I didn't know the movie until after I wrote this one, but the Leap Year with
Yeah.
Amy Adams.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I
I like
can't.
him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I kind of see that like them, but
Hmm.
now they're too old.
Right, yeah, yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
That happened.
But I need a dark-haired, hot guy.
Gerald
So I don't know.
Butler. He's a bit
Oh,
Matthew Good.
oh, I love Matthew Good. Oh my God. Did you watch Discovery of Witches?
I didn't.
Oh, but he's in it. It's so good. Just saying.
Kate was gonna say him. Everybody's chiming in here. Matthew Good is apparently the consensus.
I like it. I'm in. I'm totally in.
Done. Well, thank you for your time. Before you leave us, I'd love to know if you're reading anything that we absolutely should read or look out for, if you're reading an arc or yeah, anything that you love or
Look around
that
my
you can
office.
leave us with.
I just started reading, oh, I'm about halfway through it. James by Everett Percival. I think that's his
Okay.
name.
Oh
He's the guy
yeah,
who
is
wrote
that
the
good?
movie. Yes, it is.
It's
It's
got
real, but
the
it's
most
also
crazy
hard.
reviews.
Yeah, it's a tough read. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like it's important, and he's just a brilliant author. I don't know if any of you saw American Fiction, the movie, which I absolutely loved. But he wrote Erasure, which that movie was based on. So
Okay.
anyway, but yeah, James is fantastic. That's kind of I do read. I always say I don't read literature, but I'm a big fat liar because then I look at my shelf and I'm like, oh, you read James. You were completely obsessed with Cersei. So, and oh, Song of Achilles was great too. Okay. Anyway, I love Madeline Miller. It's
Madeline,
like
yeah, Madeline Miller. Here we go.
she's oh wow. She's just something else. You know
We
what I
read
mean? Like there's
Cersei in the book
nobody.
club, actually.
Wasn't that so good?
So good.
Yeah. I wrote one of my novellas I set in Greece, and I have them looking for an artifact because I was so obsessed with Cersei.
I
Do
love
you know what I
that.
mean? So this is how like it feeds into your little creative brain. But then I just got this. I haven't read it yet, but for any of the rom-com people, if you can
Okay.
see it.
Wedding Dashers, Heather McBreen.
And it looks really cute, but they just sent it. See, this is the perk of being an author is you just get like you'll open your mail like, hey, there's a book with no note. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm reading James, and then I do read nonfiction because I am trying to be more disciplined. So I'm reading Inner Excellence and Atomic Habits.
Oh, Atomic Habits is great. I read it just recently, actually. I haven't
Yeah,
read
I'm
Excellence.
plugging. Inner Excellence is really good. It's kind of weird. They're both kind of like in tandem. So my mornings, my one thing in the morning is I wake up and I read one chapter of a nonfiction book. So I'm rotating those two because I'm trying to like get back to, discipline.
Just to make sure Inner Excellence is Jim Murphy. Is that the right one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Highly recommend. And I think it was popular, but then one of the Philadelphia Eagles players, this is my favorite shot ever. He was reading it on the sidelines, I think during the playoffs. So the thing blew up and I'm like, well, it's worth it. Like I'm a few chapters in, I'm like, it's good. It's really good.
Awesome. I'll check it out. Well, thank you so much, Jenn, for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank
We
you.
can't wait for your fantasy novel. Can you tell us the name of it yet or no?
It is, oh yeah, that's the one they changed. They changed it to Witches of Dubious Origin.
Okay, Witches of Durat. You've already told us that. All right,
Yeah.
we will look forward to seeing that come out then, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.